"You've served for 20 years and still live like a ghost," my mother said. I smiled faintly. Ghosts remember everything. It started at Yale. Spring air, crisp but gentle, rustled the graduation banners strung across the historic quad. The brass band played something cheerful, hollow. I sat in the very last row, in the shadows of proud parents and polished deans. I hadn't told anyone I was coming back, not because I wanted to surprise them, just there was no one left to surprise. Sophie, my younger sister, was the star today. Crimson honor sash, white heels, glossy curls, the future of global finance, as the program proudly declared. Her name was everywhere. Brochures, projectors, even on the souvenir tote bags. Mine wasn't anywhere. My name wasn't printed, not even as family guest. I was invisible. My mother turned from her seat a few rows ahead and locked eyes with me. Her lips curled. 20 years, Claire. And you still don't even own a proper home. Imagine that. My father chuckled. She'll be the one depending on Sophie, I bet. Their voices weren't loud, but they knew exactly how to make them just audible enough. For me. For those sitting close by. For the sting to land and echo. I didn't react. That's the first thing you learn when you've spent 2 decades following orders. You train yourself not to flinch, especially when the battlefield is bloodless and the enemy wears pearls and cologne. Sophie laughed on stage, hugging a professor. People cheered. My parents stood, beaming. Our Sophie was always destined for greatness, my mother cooed. And just like that, I was a silhouette again, forgotten behind fanfare, erased in plain sight. But here's the thing about being dismissed for too long. Eventually, the silence you're buried under becomes the very fuel you rise with. And this time, I didn't come just to clap politely and vanish. I came because someone once told me the best revenge story doesn't start with rage. It starts with restraint. I adjusted the program in my lap, the paper smooth and pristine. My name wasn't in it. But it didn't matter. Because soon, the whole damn campus would know exactly who I was. And no one, especially not my parents, was ready for that. It happened right as they called Sophie's name. The applause came first. Explosive. Proud. My parents jumped to their feet like they were at the Oscars. Cameras flashed. Her heels clicked across the stage. My mother even waved like a senator's wife. "She's our legacy." My father whispered loudly enough for the dean beside him to hear. "We're so proud of her." And that's when it started. A low rumble. Deep, distant. Not thunder, not traffic. A vibration underfoot. Then a crackle of feedback across the speakers. Heads began to turn, unsure. The sound sharpened. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Rotor blades, a helicopter. At Yale, in the middle of a graduation ceremony, people looked up, shading their eyes. One professor stepped off stage, confused. Gowns fluttered. Hats flew. Then it descended. A Black Hawk. Full military. Right into the center of the quad. You should have seen their faces. Guests shrieked. Students ducked. A kid dropped his latte and just froze, mouth open. And me? I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately, like someone who'd done it before. My black coat whipped in the wind as I walked forward, past stunned parents, overturned chairs, and fluttering programs. A man stepped out of the helicopter. Combat uniform. Rigid. He scanned the crowd. Then his eyes locked on mine. He snapped to a salute and shouted over the roar, "General Morgan, ma'am, you're needed. Immediate priority protocol." Silence fell. The kind that drops like a guillotine. I heard gasps. A champagne glass cracked on the ground. Sophie's mouth was open, but no words came. My mother's fingers gripped her clutch like it might save her. My father just stared, jaw slack. And for a second, just 1 second, I turned and looked at them. Let me ask you something. If that were you, if your family had erased you for years, what would you say to them in that moment? Would you say anything at all? Drop it in the comments. Seriously, I want to know. Because I didn't speak, not yet. I just turned back to the officer and nodded. He held the chopper door open. I stepped inside, not just as someone they forgot, but as someone they could never ignore again. And as the blades lifted us skyward, the campus shrank beneath me, along with every ounce of shame they'd tried to bury me under. They called me a ghost. Now the world just saluted me. The helicopter didn't take me back to base. Not right away. We landed on a restricted airstrip just outside Fort Myer, where Ree Dalton, Lieutenant Colonel Dalton now, was waiting with a manila envelope and a look I'd seen only once before. The last time we were pulling civilians out of Ghazni under fire. This time, it was numbers, not bullets. "Claire," he said quietly, "you're not going to like what we found." I followed him into a secure briefing room. No flag, no nameplates, just cold lights and a hum of tension. He slid the folder across the table. Inside, 5 documents, all bearing my name, my military ID, my digital clearance code, but not my signature. These were all authorized between 2016 and 2020, Ree explained. Contracts tied to private military logistics, procurement funds, small at first, then a $750,000 transfer. I blinked. To where? He flipped to the last page. A Delaware holding company, Shell Corporation, front name Meridian Impact. I knew that name. I flagged them once for billing 3 times the cost of diesel in a humanitarian op. And now, my name was on their authorization slip. I felt like the floor moved under me. "I never signed any of this," I said, voice flat. "This clearance key was locked, air-gapped. No one should have had it." Ree nodded. "We traced the IP log that submitted the digital signature." He paused. "It was your father's home network, Clare, Connecticut." It took a second for the words to register. Then came the sting. My father, Robert Morgan, he didn't just steal money, he stole my name. The one I bled for, the one I carried through deployments, loss, trauma, classified zones, and earned inch by inch. He wore it like it was nothing, like it was his, to use. "You said 5 contracts," I whispered. "Are they all like this?" "Worse." Ree pulled up a laptop and showed me a scan of a power of attorney agreement filed while I was deployed in Romania. My name at the top, his signature at the bottom. Mine was forged. Badly. The next document made my blood run cold. A wire transfer of $800,000 into an account under Meridian Impact LLC. Secondary beneficiary? Sophie Morgan. I stared at that name like it was a weapon. The sister I protected. The one they paraded. She was listed as the heir to the money stolen using my identity. Was she in on it? Or just the chosen face of a legacy built on my silence? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just betrayal. It was surgical erasure. I had spent 2 decades earning trust behind the walls of government secrets. Now I was watching the people who raised me weaponize that trust against me for profit. And suddenly, all those dinners I'd missed, all those "we're proud of Sophie" toasts, they weren't just favoritism, they were part of the plan. They invited me to dinner, a celebration, they said, for Sophie's new post at the World Bank. Elaine picked the place, of course. Floor-to-ceiling windows, wine glasses that caught the city lights just right, and waiters who refilled your water before you even touched it. The kind of place people go to pretend everything's perfect. I wore my dress uniform, not because I wanted to make a statement, but because I didn't need to hide anymore. The moment I walked in, conversation dipped. My mother gave me a practiced smile. Claire decided to join us. She said to the table like I was a stray dog she let in for charity. "We're honored." I didn't answer. I just nodded. Robert sat at the end, navy blazer, cufflinks gleaming. Sophie, radiant as ever, laughed softly between bites, oblivious or pretending to be. Around them, lobbyists, financial advisors, young diplomats, people who knew nothing of war but talked about stability like it was a line item on a spreadsheet. I waited until the 3rd course. The duck was served with fig reduction. I could barely taste it. I reached into my small clutch and pulled out a narrow black box, set it on the table directly in front of Sophie. She blinked. "What's this?" "A gift," I said, "from one sister to another." She opened it slowly. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, understated, engraved on the inside. 13. Bravo 62. Claire. My deployment code. Sophie tilted her head. I don't understand. It's a reminder, I said quietly, that names matter, and even things buried leave a trace. Elaine tried to laugh, but it came out sharp. Claire always loved her metaphors. Robert didn't move. I let the silence do its job. Then I picked up my water glass and spoke casually, almost like an afterthought. Dad, do you still remember a company called Meridian Impact? He paused mid-sip, just for a second, but it was enough. Should I? He asked, voice steady. It came up, I said. Old paperwork. Looked familiar. I didn't push further. I didn't have to. Because in that moment, he knew what I knew, and he knew I wasn't bluffing. His hand trembled just enough for me to notice. The rest of dinner dragged on, full of half-fake smiles and questions that no one really cared to answer. But the power had shifted. For once, they were the ones trying to read me. When we stood to leave, I passed behind Robert's chair, paused just slightly, and leaned in. I didn't whisper. I didn't need to. I'm not here to make peace, I said. I'm here to remind you I'm still alive. Then I walked out. Not angry, not loud, just done waiting for permission to exist. The federal hearing room wasn't built for drama. No grand speeches, no cameras flashing, just muted walls, steel-framed chairs, and a row of commissioners with tired eyes and sharp pens. But today, it was personal. I sat in uniform, full honors, nameplate straight, medals gleaming like they knew what was coming. Angela Ruiz, my attorney, stood beside me, calm, unshakable. On the other side of the room, Robert Morgan, flanked by two gray-suited lawyers and a daughter who could barely look up from the floor. Sophie, the same sister whose name was listed as beneficiary to a fund stolen in mine. The commissioner tapped the mic. This is a preliminary review into charges of federal fraud, identity misappropriation, and misuse of military clearance codes, filed by Major General Clare Morgan. Angela stood. In the next hour, she began, we'll demonstrate how Mr. Morgan systematically forged his daughter's identity over the course of 5 years, using her clearance to open military-grade financial access points while she was deployed overseas. She laid out each piece like a surgeon, IP logs traced to Robert's home, digitally forged documents signed with banned software, wire transfers to a shell firm, Meridian Impact, LLC. Power of attorney filed while I was in Romania. Audio recordings. She doesn't need to know. I'm her father. I have the right. The room was silent, but you could feel the air change. The commissioner asked, General Morgan, would you like to speak on record? I stood. When I left for deployment, I left behind a country I believed in and a family I thought I could trust. I looked straight at Robert. What I returned to was a name I no longer recognized, because it had been sold, signed, stamped, and turned into someone else's transaction. Angela stepped forward, submitting one final document. This account, she said, was opened under Clare Morgan's credentials, but the secondary beneficiary? She turned the page. Sophie Morgan. I heard her breath catch. My sister looked up, eyes wide, voice trembling. Wait, I didn't know. Robert didn't flinch. The commissioner scribbled notes. Then, we'll reconvene for final recommendations in 72 hours. The gavel dropped. Just like that, it was over, at least for now. As we rose to leave, I walked past the man who once raised me, the man who told people I was a ghost, that I lived like I didn't matter. I stopped just beside him, and this time, I whispered, you used me like a passcode. Now watch what happens when I reset everything. He didn't respond, because what could he possibly say? He taught me how to fight, but I'd just taught him what it felt like to lose, not in war, but in truth. 1 week later, I stood beneath the marble archway of the Pentagon's Grand Hall. Hundreds of officials in full dress, rows of polished shoes, the weight of silence before a ceremony. not of celebration, but of reckoning. I had been summoned to receive the Distinguished Service Medal, the highest non-combat honor awarded for exemplary leadership and integrity under classified operations. But that wasn't what this was really about. This was about reclaiming a name that had been stolen. Angela stood beside me in the front row, Ree Dalton 2 seats over, Sophie 3 seats behind, quiet, hair pulled back, no makeup, no flash. Her resignation from the World Bank had made headlines. Robert Morgan wasn't in the room. He'd been indicted 3 days prior. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the podium, voice steady. For 20 years, Major General Clare Morgan has led with honor in shadows most will never see. But today, we step into the light with her. I walked forward, not in stride, but in stillness. Each step louder than applause. The medal was placed gently around my neck. My hand shook, but not from nerves, from everything I had held in for years. I was offered the mic. I took it. "Thank you," I began. I was told this would feel like redemption, but that's not the word I'd use. I let the pause settle. Redemption implies I had something to apologize for. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. I didn't ask for this medal to prove my worth. I came here to say, publicly, that truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to be spoken, even if no one listens. My eyes drifted across the crowd, then landed gently on Sophie. For a long time, I thought if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, maybe my family would see me. But some people only see what they can use. I exhaled. I am not the daughter of Robert Morgan. I am Major General Clare Morgan, and I wrote my own name into history. The applause didn't erupt. It built, slow and certain, like people weren't just clapping for me, but for the version of themselves they once silenced too. Angela touched my shoulder as I stepped down. She didn't say congrats. She just said, "You did it your way." Later that night, I sat alone in a quiet office tucked behind the ceremony hall. The medal rested in a wooden box. Beside it, a faded photo. My unit in eastern Afghanistan. Smiles frozen in time. Some of those faces never made it home. They were the ones I wanted this moment for. A knock at the door. Sophie. She didn't speak at first, just held up a document, a signed affidavit testifying to what she had unknowingly received. Money tied to accounts in my name. She'd added her voice to the case. It didn't fix everything, but it mattered. As she turned to leave, I asked softly, "Did you ever think I was enough?" She looked back. "I think you were always more than enough. I just couldn't see it until he wasn't blocking the view." And with that, she left. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt real. What about you? Have you ever had someone try to write over your name? Act like you were invisible until they needed something? Let me know in the comments, because some of the most powerful revenge stories don't come from anger. They come from finally being seen. And I see you.